Hello, welcome back to the ministry. This is Carmen, and today we are talking about Deja vu. And we're picking up where I left off in the previous video and it was just about to get good. So, well, come on, keep bringing it because I'm enjoying this. I hope you are too. So, the bomb is already gone off and he finds the fragments. They send an officer out to meet him. He's a detective. The detective was trying to figure out where he was. He was down underneath the bridge. The detective had to go down there and look for him. When he found him, he was trying to get up to one of these beams because it was some residue on one of the beams. He asked for a boost while the guy's asking him all these questions. Where's your partner? What is he doing? He went on vacation, blah, 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 a whole bunch of, yeah, da, da, da. He said, no, my name is Doug Carlin, and he tells him that he's there to check, and once he goes under there, he finds something. He comes down and he smells it. It's the nuclear fluid that was used to blow up the bomb, and he tells them the make of the nuclear fluid, which now is evidence that there was an actual bomb. Now, I come back and I'm talking about this. Just before I left y'all, I was making a point of saying that your God-ordained spouse has been surrounded by wolves, but he hasn't realized it. He's amongst a bunch of vipers and snakes, and he didn't realize it. And I'm going to give you what the revelation that I got when I was listening to one of my ministers. She said that David wanted to belong. David had the desire to want to belong, so he dulled himself down for a season where he was trying to fit in. And in him trying to fit in, he ended up getting caught up in some situations and scenarios. One of her names was Bathsheba. That led him astray into some foolery that caused his life to blow all the way up. Now he's surveying the damage, trying to figure out what the hell just happened to my life? What? But the people around him is like, okay, it just done blow up. But let's talk about Jonah again. Some of your God-ordained spouses in the midst of this stuff get ready to blow up. The people surrounding them saw that it was about to blow up. Jonah was on that boat. That storm was acting a fool. They trying to figure out, well, why in the world all this happening? And they praying to God, and God done gave them a revelation. The reason that this is happening is because Jonah's on the boat. All kinds of turmoil not only was it happening in his life, and he sleep to it, just like the disciples when they went to sleep when Jesus needed them to pray. He was sleeping good sleep. Your God-ordained spouse wanted to ignore it. I was in prayer several weeks back because God had brought me into prayer about some things. You remember that video I was sitting in the room and I was talking about I had a major headache? That morning, not only that morning, but I think that night or a couple nights later, I was hearing a song by The Weeknd talking about, it was something like, I don't want to know that you're playing me. Keep it on the low. Some of these men wanted to remain ignorant, and because they was trying to remain ignorant and sleep, the people around them lives is going crazy because one, God already done sent you to start praying for them. So everything's starting to come up and out the way it should because God's doing the pruning and starting to pop up the issues that are in his life. And he's sitting there, what's going on? Why is everything blowing up around me? But God's saying, I got to show you what's blowing up around you because I need you to get out of here before it really do blow up. But now he's surveilling the damage, and the people that knew, because half of them was the reason that it was blowing up in the first place, because they led him into the trepidation and foolery because he wanted to fit in. David wanted to fit in. Some of your husbands were Davids and they wanted to fit in. And because they was trying to fit in with the group, they ended up down there messing up what they had going for them with God. And now they're in the midst of this. So he goes back to the office. Well, first he goes to deal with the police department, and they all sitting there looking around, trying to figure out, oh, what are we doing? We don't. And he's like, who's in charge? These people went to authority figures in their mind. I mean, your God-a-day space went to people that he thought was authorities that would know, how's this going to work? What is this? I'm experiencing this. Because what they started to experience was God opening their spiritual eyes to show them what was going on around them, what was going on with the kingdom marriages, what was going on, and they got scared. So they needed to go to an authority figure to get help. Who's in charge? Who's in charge? Who knows about this? Who understands this? Meanwhile, when they start asking questions, the rest of these people are in cahoots with each other, and they sitting up there huddled together like, he asking questions. Why are you asking questions? What are you asking questions at all? What's with the questions? Oh my God, they're questions. Remember the checkmate? When a king is checkmated, that means they have to surround him in such a way to block him in. But they coming to the realization he's starting to wake up. And that's a problem. So they're looking at each other as he's approaching them like, what? Your God-a-day spouse wasn't stupid. He was just you had spirits of confusion. You had witchcraft on top of the spirits of confusion. You had the fact that he was just plainly asleep because he wanted to act in his rebellion anyway. So you got 3 levels of confusion on top of himself. And now he's starting to wake up, and they're recognizing that he's waking up. And his intelligence is starting to kick in. And the path of logic is starting to make sense of the disillogical. Why? Because he's becoming spiritually aware of what was going on. And he comes in talking about, oh, this was the blasting thing. There was about 100,000 pieces of this in this type of thing. So what he's realizing is he's seeing where the contaminants were. He's seeing where the particles that caused the explosion were. And he's also looking to find the accelerant. He figured out what's accelerated this blow up. He's not quite certain of who and how, but he's putting the pieces together. When God came in, he started to help him put the pieces together, and your prayers began to help that process. So his intelligence as a man started to kick in. And he's like, oh, wait, what? So what ends up happening is let's see, I already went past that part. He ends up going back to the office. He's like, he wanted some coffee first. So he went and got coffee from that location. And he went back to his office, and he's checking his messages. The Lord gave me a dream. You want me to put this in here now? The Lord gave me a dream about notes being passed. I'm going to say that much so far. I don't think I'm supposed to say any further about the notes that were being passed. But I will say this. Your God-ordained spouse was a commander. Or at least he had a position of high ranking in the spirit realm. Which means he's spiritually aware of a lot of things. This detective, as an ATF officer, had a high ranking in his department. And messages were being passed over to him in relation to this case. Spiritually, there have been messages that have been being passed to your God-ordained spouse, whether it was from you or from God, but the messages were being passed to him. So he starts making phone calls. Phones represent communication. So he's starting to make communication with trying to figure out where these things are coming from, how they came into being, and what was causing the confusion in the first place. He makes a call. He has to call the sheriff's office because the woman came in saying another body was found. He pretty much ignores that. He's like, I'm going to call that back. We're going to identify it later. There's too many bodies right now. We can't even think about that right now. Blah, 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 blah. So he gets the phone number and he's like, okay, let me call this number. He calls the number and it's a woman who left him a message that morning. And he's like, okay. He takes the message, but he's also simultaneously looking at the video footage of the blast zone that he asked for earlier. Your God-ordained spouse has the eye to see. And not only that, I believe that a lot of our God-ordained spouses has spiritual vision too. But they don't understand how it works quite well enough. And with that understanding, they're a little bit lost in sauce as to everything that is going on around them. I just saw 10:23, which means you had to have faith in God. This man needed to have faith in God in order to come into the understanding of what he was seeing. But he had to keep up with his thoughts and his vision. This man has been walking in whatever area, career, field, whatever the Lord has had him in. And because of the speed of that environment, he's had to have an awareness to be able to keep up with everything that's going on around him. Mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. He had to do it. So he could be on the phone, but he's also watching the videotape. So your God-ordained spouse is in spiritual communication, but he's also got eyes to see. Remember, in the previous word I talked about, I had a vision that he appeared to be blind, but he could see very well. Your God-ordained spouse could see very well, but the people around him don't know that. Especially the ones that are starting to come into cahoots with each other. I heard Stephanie P did a word several months back that said, your enemies will come together. They could hate each other, but they hate you more. So they'll become best friends with one another just to hem you up. When they realize that he's starting to wake up or realize he does have eyes and can see. So he ends up taking the car. It's a trolley to the location. When he gets to the location, he's on the phone with the sheriff's office and he gets the call that the woman's body that had been found, it had to have died about an hour before the explosion. So he goes to the coroner's office to check her body out. Now here's where you come in. You have been in a state in the physical, catch this, physically you have appeared dead to everyone. Think about this. You've appeared dead to everybody. Nothing in your life's moving. You ain't got no finances. You ain't got this. You ain't got nothing. That everything that would appear to be the things that people would need to operate in the world. Your life is dead. Thereby, your physical life is dead. And your God-ordained spouse was spiritually. Oh, you bringing that back here too, God? Oh, I hear you. Okay, he bringing me back to the scripture in Ezekiel. It's Ezekiel 16. I think it's scripture 7, where the God-ordained spouse passes by and says, "Live." Something can't live unless it was dead first. You can't call life to something that was living. You have to call life to something that was dead. He found her dead. When he first saw you, you appeared dead. And to him, you were dead to him. Because he was still asleep, so he couldn't see spiritually you were still alive. But that's going to make sense in a minute. So he's taking in the information in relation to her. He goes, he helps the coroner. He's getting the information in relation to when she left, what happened, how she ended up there, potentially that she may have had a date the night before. He goes to her father. Your God-ordained spouse has to go to the father in order to find out information about you. He's inquired about you. He couldn't understand. He went to the authorities when he started having visions and all these kind of things to the people that were authorities to him. But he had to go to the Father to find out about you. He brought the Father back a photograph of her dead. You got a dang spouse was given information spiritually about your spiritual death, and he was supposed to pray over you to live. I remember I was in the midst of my season of constraint when God had me out there walking on the water for real, for real. And about 3.5 years ago, I remember sitting in the library and I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, if you're telling me that this man truly does love me, and it was just like that. I was sitting at the computer. I said, if you're telling me that this is the man, ask him to stop praying for me. Ezekiel 16:7 talks about live. Blood, live. And I'm also getting the blood of Jesus. The infusion of the blood of Jesus that makes things what? Live. Had to be enacted. But your husband's voice, which is a representation of God in the physical in your life, is an activator. So when he says live, the things in natural that we're not living, oh, God got you hooked in the spirit. But when your husband starts to speak over you in the natural, that's when you see movement. So when they started talking, when your God-ordained spouse put his eyes on the Father, that's when he started to see. So the Father gave him information about where she lived, and then he gave her 2 photographs. God gave your God-ordained spouse information about you, but he also let him know you was in the secret place with him, home. Your home was with him. And then he gave him visual points. Photographs. Photographic memory is what I'm getting, and or something to hold on to in relation to you. Maybe it was a contact point. Maybe it was something that he gave him to hold on to. And that's when your God-ordained spouse started looking into you. But at first, it's investigative. He was looking into you. Who is this person? How did they come into this picture? And how did they have anything to do with anything at all? So they go to investigate. Where would they need to go to investigate? He had to go to her house. As he's going through her home, he's checking her answering machine. He's listening back to her messages. Some of your God-ordained spouses, they were checking, communicating, seeking out, trying to find out what was going on, who, what, and the people around you, who, when, where, why, how. What investigators do. They were investigating from a high place. They had to go into a spiritual place in order to even figure out what in the world they was dealing with in order to find these forms of communication in the first place. Because they didn't have it in the natural. So as he's walking through the house, he sees on the refrigerator written, "You can save her." God was telling him, I know you see her where she is, but you can save her. But I need you to continue to operate with me because you're in her home. In the secret place with me is her home. You can save her. Yes, he found blood on tissues, which brings me back to Ezekiel 16. There was blood when the man found this woman. God just wrapping this around. Oh my God. But see, you're going to find out later where that blood actually came from. But God's using it in this format. That the blood and the bleeding. Because see, the woman's hands, the fingers were severed off. Some of the things that you have been trying to put your hands to, it seemed like it wasn't working. But God had you using your hands and your fingers to fight. And the enemy's been trying to cut your hands off, cut the fingers off, sever them. So what he figured was, due to the fact that her hand had no fingers on it, either she was killed in the house and her fingers were cut off. That's where the blood came from. He never looked any further. But when the answering machine gets to the point where the phone number that he left her is given, one, the call goes in and she called him, and he realized he called her back. That's who he called back. And he's like, how did I even know to call this woman back? And I don't remember. What? He looks at something on the wall and it says 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 in the Bible is a reference to a scripture that talks about this mountain shall be removed and turned into a plain. Ephesians 2:14 speaks about the fact that there is a what's the wording I'm looking for, God? Ephesians 2:14, middle wall of partition. But 11:23 speaks about the mountain being removed, which would be the partition, and made into a plain. So they're still checking information to figure out at the bomb site what in the world went down. So while they're there, he comes in and he explains, well, I found out some new information that y'all don't have. And he starts giving them the information that he has. Some of your goddamn spouses, because they were ignorant to the fact that these people are people he should not have trusted, and because they felt like authorities to him, he thought he was intellectually being smart to go to them and start telling them the information that he had. But God had given him the clues. A lot of the stuff that he was getting had been clues that God gave him. And he over here thinking, I'm an intellectual investigator over here. Let me go tell these people that I know this information. And they're like, some of them are like, But there needs to be a bridge. How is the bridge? And understand, bridge, crossover. Okay? His partner's car was found at the location. And he's like, my partner's here. Oh, he must have came back from vacation. And he was like, those cars were the cars that came in from the boat accident. And he's like, what? So he's confused. Some of your goddamn spouses have lost somebody. Somebody that was dear to them in the midst of all of this. I already know who that was for my goddamn spouse. And he was caught up in the fact that this had happened. And somebody comes to him and says, we want to help you. God has prophetic witnesses all around your goddamn spouse, but he didn't know to go to them and not the people that he thought was authorities. So this man comes to him and says, come on, I want to show you something. And he's like, I don't know what in the world is it you want to show, because he don't know these people, so he's a little bit trepidatious of these things. Like, what you trying to show me? What is it? And he's like, you trust me? I need you to follow me. So God is using these individuals to help. Okay? But this is where it's going to get a little confusing here, because of the way that the Lord's kind of showing me to explain this to you. So he comes in, they ride him into this building, and you see this, they pass this apparatus that looked like something that came from the movie Time Cop. If you know that movie, it's a good movie. Go watch it. And he says, I have no questions because I don't know what I should be questioning about. Some of your goddamn spouses like, This is all new to me. What's going on? Anybody that's got answers, he's kind of intrigued to find out what they know, but he still don't know. The prophetic witnesses God sending are the ones that he needs to be following, but he still don't know who's the authority and who's right, who's wrong. So it was a mixture of people, because some of the people that he just left came back with this guy and were at that office. Which means there's a mixture of people that are prophetic witnesses mixed in with people, disciples and Judases. So he finding out these information, and they're giving him vague answers. It's like, look, we got this camera footage, and here's where it comes in the monitoring. It's like, we got camera footage where we can see, but we can only see up to about 4 days before. And he looks at his watch. He said, well, the incident happened. It's 12 o'clock now, which means it's only 3 days. Hear me with your spiritual ears. I've been hearing all over the spirit in the past couple of days. 3 days, 3 days. In 3 days, God's going to move. In 3 days, it's about to happen. In 3 days, you about to get the answers you were seeking. In 3 days, in 3 days, and in 3 days, and in 3 days. He has 3 days that he can catch up in this footage to what's going on. Your God-ordained spouse was spiritually dead. Let me tell you where he was. He's been on the road to Damascus. At this particular point, this man is entering the road of Damascus. What happens in the road of Damascus? The man is confronted on the road of Damascus. When that man came to him and asked him to become a part of this, he just entered into the road of Damascus, where he had to be blinded for 3 days. They do not explain to him what he is looking at. You realize that you can be looking at something and not know what you are seeing? So he's watching them do the angles on the camera, and they're like, oh, well, we got all this camera footage. He's like, how is you have a continual shot of everything? And he's like, oh, satellites. Then how do you have audio? Your God-ordained spouse ain't stupid. He wasn't born yesterday. Some of your God-ordained spouses that when they went to their authority figures, and the authority figures were in cahoots trying to trap him, the people he was going to were trying to trap him. They started telling him, oh, come on, come with us. We're going to go over here. I will show you how that was done. But guess what they led him into? They led him into a level of rebellion against God's will for him, because they led him unknowingly into using witchcraft practices. Because there are so many subtle witchcraft practices that they could have come into agreement with that was stalling and holding them out of the blessing of coming into contact with you. And number one was the way in which you go through monitoring. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you. Before I came into walking with God to the fullness of the capacity, and I was still in the level of separation, there was a woman, and she was Baptist. She was a Southern Baptist woman. Christian. Southern Baptist. We used to talk on Tiny Chat years ago. And she was into tarot cards. And we know how in the world, when you don't know no better, that you're not supposed to mix that with God. Because at the time, I was still trying to come out of horoscope and all that kind of stuff. That was early in my walk. I'm talking about things that happened 8-9 years ago. You didn't know? Somebody said, come on, we're gonna take you over, and we're gonna take you to the voodoo person. You're gonna take you to the person that does the tarot card readings. We're gonna take you over there. I'm being reminded of the scene in the movie Carmen, when they took what's the name, over to the soothsayer to find out information. A lot of people just think that's fun. Just like people think that during Halloween it's a good idea to go in the bathroom and say Candyman 15 times. Oh, I'm not doing nothing. Oh, I just, and that's what the way these people were. It's like, oh, I ain't doing nothing. I mean, especially if the man don't know no better. Oh, we gonna go just look. Because I remember there were nights years ago when I used to hang with those people that we would sit there and she would do readings all night long. Because we were just intrigued by it. And we were getting answers and we thought that we knew what we were seeing and getting. But we were getting it the wrong way. And this is what happened. So he's coming in and they telling him, oh yeah, well we got the cameras and this is the satellite and then how'd you get the audio? It's like, it's a continual feed. And we got audio. And some of them were using monitoring practices to give them an ability to see into the spirit realm through sorcerers that could see into you. And these men, they don't know because they're like, right now, they just dealing with the confusion of what the heck is going on. I got messages here. I got this coming in. I went to the Father and this is information I got. And then I went to the house and this is the information I got. I had to go into the secret place with the Lord and now I done come out and don't know what in the world is going on. So I'm confused. So I'm asking y'all because y'all the people I know. And because y'all the people I know, it's like, do you know how I can deal with this? They're like, yeah, let's go to the sorceress. And like, well, I'm confused, so I guess I'll go with you. Because they were people pleasing and following people anyway. So they sit down and start going through the footage. So how much we gonna go into? Okay, I know it. I got about 2 minutes to tell you this, about a minute and a half. So what ends up happening, and I'm going into more detail in the next part, is that in summary, they sit him down and start showing him the footage. It was like, we need information. We need to know where to start. So he sits there and he thinks about where do we start? And he's like, well, I went to her apartment and I know this information. So let's go to her house. So when they go to her house and they're looking into this video footage, they're like, he's sitting there like, how the heck are y'all looking in her house? He's like, well, this is the Snow White program. I'm going to need y'all that if you are watching this and you did not see my review of Snow White, I'm going to need you to go look at that. I ain't got time to go through it right now. But that's about a 3-part video that I did talking about Snow White and her journey. Go watch that. You can go watch that, come back. You can finish this and go. But 9 times out of 10, if you're watching this, you're probably seeing 1 or 2 parts. So you see the parts that you see, go in the in-between, interim, and go watch that. Meaning you're going to get a break from this one. Meaning you're going to see 1 or 2 of these videos, and then you're going to get a break. When you get that break, go watch Snow White. Go look up my video on Snow White. It's a 3-part video. Go watch it. So, with that